Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Steftalks webinar. Today we have two great speakers, Nagesh and Dennis. I will have them introduce themselves in a little bit. They will be talking about data and AI and how it is digitally transforming pharma. If you have any questions during the webinar, go ahead and drop them in the question box on your screen, and we will do some Q&A at the end of the webinar. We are recording today's session, so if you missed it or you have to leave, we will be sending that to everyone afterwards with some main takeaways from today's webinar. So let's get started, Dennis and Anish.
Thank you very much, Amy, for this introduction. So good morning to everyone and welcome to the Steftalks webinar. As Amy said, my name is Dennis Reinders. I'm responsible for Stefanini's digital health practice at Stefanini Global, working very closely together with my co-host here today that I have the pleasure to welcome. So Nagesh, maybe before we start on the agenda topics, could you give a small introduction about yourself and your responsibilities within Stefanini, please?
Hi. Hey, thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everyone. I am Nagesh Jadhav. I lead the Digital Life Sciences and Healthcare BU for US, and I've been in the industry for more than 15 years. So that's brief about me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nagesh. So today we will speak about data and artificial intelligence in the pharma industry. So I'm sure you heard about these topics already much more than before today, since they are pretty hot items in the industries, in all industries, and especially on pharma, due to the recent changes in the world due to COVID-19. I will come back to that. I actually read an interesting article yesterday on a magazine called "Pockets of Pharmaceutical Industry Have Yet to Realize the Full Potential of Digital Technology." As we all know, the pharmaceutical industry is a very conservative market industry, but we are getting closer to a breaking point, actually, a blockbuster, as we call it, in terms of a change to digital, more agile, more innovative solutions. So we thought this might be an interesting topic for our session today, and therefore we will share our findings during this webinar. So without any further ado, I would like to kick things off by asking you, Nagesh, what are we covering today and then on the agenda, please?
Sure, thank you. So we'll cover today importance and value of data in pharma, contextualizing pharma data, what is the gold standard of evidence and what are the drivers, how the organization should tackle this data and AI challenge, how they should prepare, and then what should be the data strategy, and what are the current and future companies could do with data and AI for their transforming their functions, and current AI initiatives in pharma, and data challenges in clinical, and what should be the approach to solve that challenge. We have picked one area that's clinical, and then we can go for Q&A.
That seems like a very good program. Thank you very much for that. So let's start with the beginning. Everything starts with data, right? So how can data be transformed into business value, into intelligence? I would like to start off with a question to you, Nagesh. What are the areas of value that data actually are more imminent in the pharmaceutical industry today?
Yeah, so let's go with this. The value across each and every function is very important in pharma. If, based on this McKinsey Global Institute, it estimates that with good big data strategies and insights and decision, the value could be more than $100 billion across the healthcare value system per annum. What companies need to do is they should optimize their functions, automate, digitize, and they should increase collaboration with their peers, that's payers, providers, physicians, and partners.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay, that's understood. And in order to clarify more on this, could you perhaps set the context, of the data? And by that I mean where and how is it originating from, and what is actually the size, the magnitude of the data we're talking about here?
Sure. Compared to other industry, pharma has huge volume of data because, for example, one trial data, including the genomic data, is more than 1 petabyte because there is a lot of omics data that is coming from genomes and genome sequencing if they are addressing any particular therapeutic area, let's say COVID-19 or for any infectious disease or other viruses. And then there is proteomics data, there is protein data. So that's huge omics data. Then there is preclinical drug discovery data coming from high throughput screening, cell analysis, and drug target interactions. There is enormous clinical trial data when the sponsors do phase 1, 2, 3 trials. Okay, and there is supply chain and manufacturing data coming from smart industry 4.0 IoT sensors, supply chains, and so forth. And then there is marketing and patient data coming from their devices they wear, social media, sentiments, and Internet of Medical Things.
Mm-hmm. So that's a whole bunch of different players, actually, different tools, technologies, companies together. So I was wondering, with this big explosion of data and digital technology in the market available in the pharmaceutical area, what will be like the standard of evidence and business drivers linked to this explosion of information? Are there any trends, any evidence, any best practices that will become a standard in the coming future?
Sure. So the first generation gold standard of evidence and drivers were more on clinical trials. The second generation were more on when the digitization of claims happened and EMR data. The third generation was more from patient data, wearables, the digital pills, digital devices, IOMT again. And then post-COVID, it will be more from smart virtual trials. It's virtual trials in the pharma is nothing but like work from home. Patients can get treatments from home with telehealth systems. The fourth generation post-COVID will be more and more on patient outcomes than before.
Yes. And as I mentioned in my introduction as well, we basically see on the market a big shift actually in terms of smart trials, home-based trials, which is all good, but when we are talking about these aspects, you need to talk about data, you need tools, technology, they need to be supported, and everything has to go on in a very streamlined way. And that's why we will focus the next coming slides on this aspect here. So in addition, I was wondering, taking into consideration the magnitude of this enormous and complex volumes of data, how do you think that organizations should approach this? And since I can imagine that it is too much of an effort to handle for a single organization having to deal with all these different other stakeholders in the life cycle of this process. So therefore, I would like to know how should a pharma company or how should a player in the pharmaceutical industry approach this big data and these different stakeholders actually in terms of data collection and creating business intelligence? How would that approach be required for pharma companies in your view?
Yeah, sure. So this on this slide, how organizations should look at data, the sponsors. First, it should start with the mindset and culture. The senior management leadership should have the digital and data mindset. That is key and important. That will percolate down to each and every employee, where they'll treat data as a key asset. Then functional COEs. Organizations should build functional COEs around data and AI. They should start with key functions. I would rather start at the earlier functions like omics, and then I would start with preclinical and discovery, and then clinical, because here is enormous data coming out from experiments that could be used to repurpose, redesign drugs. And then build a strong network of partners, startups, academia. You can see Merck has partnered with Institute of Systems Biology. Then Takeda is collaborating with MIT. Novartis has built this biome is very popular. They have built this innovation hub with various partners, their internal teams and collaboration. Mm-hmm. And again, sponsors should not shy from collaboration. They should collaborate more with providers, payers, physicians, and have the industry will be evolving towards value-based contracting, looking at the outcomes, how good the patient feels at the end of the day.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so now coming more to the actual handling of data and making it future ready to implement AI, could you maybe elaborate a little bit on the main drivers and pitfalls that pharma companies or people involved with in the pharmaceutical industry should be aware of in terms of data strategy?
Sure. So with this, organizations should have for data strategy, you have start with organization and governance, define the roles, ownership, accountability, and define the standards and policies for data. Then the strategy should be aligned with the business goals, functions goals, and enterprise-wide goals. The architecture and roadmap should be aligned to the organizations and again functions goals. Let's say, for example, it should be aligned to in clinical, it should be further aligned to not only clinical but the therapeutic areas they are into focused on, and they should be the roadmap and architecture should be so future ready that not only one therapeutic area, but they can take us any indication, and they should be able to implement AI tools and technologies. So that should be the architect and roadmap foundation. The
Mm-hmm.
organization should, yeah, and focus on the quality of data because garbage in is garbage out. And
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me, but really drilling a little bit down more on the topic of AI, I also think that our audience would be interested in understanding what are the areas of having a lot of data to manage and how AI could benefit to them actually. Could you give some examples where AI would match the needs for data efficiency, data collection, data analytics in pharma?
sure. So Uh, in silico drug discovery, AI could be leveraged into computational drug design discovery, where large data sets of APIs or leads could be used to, with a pattern or with algorithms. They could be tried and tested with various proteins, targets, lock and key, and there are various computational tools and methodologies. The drug discovery tools and applications could be trained with AI. Then in preclinical testing, this in silico animal models could be created and experiments could be done on that before going to animal testing, and automation of cell analysis that can be done with AI. And the most important factor where AI and data is widely used is on digital trials, digitizing trials, going for smart virtual trials, and using AI and data for optimizing the trials for site selection, selecting the right site, selecting the investigators, patient population selection, because that is important. Then further, data and AI could be used to engage the patient, because that is more important. We want pharma companies would want more and more patients to stay, that is patient retention, till the end of the trial to have better results. Okay, and then it could be used in diagnosis, smart supply chain and manufacturing, and then further into personalized medicine, because you have now genotype to phenotype data and the patient's behavior, so based on that, personalized medicine treatments and care can be given with data and AI.
Yes, yeah. I also read something which is very interesting. We're actually moving from healthcare to preventive care, basically. So we were in the past more waiting for patients to get sick and then actually perform or offer a treatment. But we're actually moving into a way through to digitalization, AI, other digital tools, wearables, monitoring into a proactive modus, so that we can actually predict the status actually not only of people who are in clinical trials, but also in therapeutic areas beyond that. And that leads us to our next slide, basically, which are the challenges in the clinical area for pharma companies. So the way of doing clinical trials today is very disparate, very manual, very complex. It has a low return on investment. I think we all know those statistics around clinical trials where the investment in the R&D section of a clinical trial is costing between $1 and $2 billion. And not only are not every molecule is brought to the market, they're actually encompassing a lot of people, a lot of money, a lot of investment. So a lot of these trials these days are very manual, very complex, as we said, and are requiring a constant check and go in terms of data verification. Where we're moving into the future, basically, is a modus, and that brings us to the next slide, whereby with the complexity of users, of patients, CROs, CRAs in the field, application devices, wearables, everything together, people, patients, and clinical sites are not able to find their way through the big bush of information. So what the future we are seeing basically happening in the pharmaceutical and the e-clinical world is a platform or multiple platforms who are centralizing and integrating all of those tools. We have the typical silos here, from study builds to the provisioning and the setup of the devices and the wearables in a clinical trial, entering the smart trial operation with the different e-clinical platforms that you are seeing here, EDC, ECOA, eTMF, ERT, and so on and so on. And then also a big jump into more decentralized trials, global trials, patient anywhere, collecting information anywhere. If patients and hospitals actually have to remember which platform to contact, which is their password in case of help, which is the phone number to call, and so on, we are seeing this as a big liability for people basically dropping out. Patients who are in clinical trials are even can be sick, can be in a difficult medical or clinical situation, emotional situation, and might by having not being felt taken care of, drop out of studies, even in therapeutic areas where they're paying a lot of money. If the motivation is not there, is the ROI for the patient, but also for the clinician and the doctor, the nurse, is not there. If they don't see the benefit of continuing with the program, they will drop out. And for the people here in this call who are into the clinical area, we all know how much money and effort is costing to recruit patients, to recruit digital sites, clinical sites, and so on. So we want to do everything to avoid that. So the market is evolving into a more condensed, a more centralized approach in terms of technology and support, bringing on tools which are integrating all of these different vendors, applications, and tools into one platform. So the platform for clinical transformation is really this one here that we are seeing for the future. And some initiatives are moving into that direction. We have the Transcelerate approach, where pharma companies are putting their heads together, getting some ideas around how to improve technology, how to improve efficiency in terms of tools in clinical research. But there is still a long way to go, and a lot of ideas to bring to the market, actually, in terms of digital efficiencies and centralization.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead, Nagesh.
I would like to add. Yeah. So each and every function, tools, application should have a platform approach. Like they should function like a unified system, delivering a value delivery system where all the tools, applications, vendors, they all work as a cohesive, one unified system for that particular function. If not across the enterprise, at least the function should be delivering high value on the investment on tools and technologies where they collaborate more. That's what I would recommend an approach should be.
Mm-hmm. What we're seeing as well on the market, and I think most of you on this webinar would recognize that we see a big shift actually in the players on the market. So pharma companies are acquiring smaller biotech companies or state-of-the-art, biotech or pharma companies with one specific therapeutic area. We see the same thing happening in the CROs, in technology companies. So we're moving into a more centralized world anyway, with different competences. And the pharmaceutical area is an area where basically pharma companies are just putting this, at the end of the day, when a molecule is developed into becoming a drug, putting their brand on the box basically, and everything is outsourced, meaning there is also a need for a centralized approach in terms of data analytics. You have 20, 30 different partners involved in clinical trials or beyond, talking to patients. You get nurses in the field, you get your technology companies, CROs is collecting information, CRAs are having information, you get training information for patients or for clinical sites, you get the medical and clinical information that needs to be processed as well. So all of that brings us to a big magnitude of information which needs to be analyzed and links have to be made in terms of creating efficiencies and finding ways of doing things more efficiently. So this will be the biggest challenge, in our opinion, for the future, basically, of the pharmaceutical industry, having an increasing amount of records of data available. To give you an idea, the expectation for EMR, for electronic medical records, is expected to be multiplied by 1,000 by 2023. So the availability, the willingness of data, even from patients who used to be very conservative, doctors as well, in terms of information sharing, a lot of people are, becoming more trusted and more familiar and more available to exchange data, and these need to be supported. It's a very good example in the COVID-19 world. Like, I'm based in Belgium, but I hear the same from different other areas, is that governments will be not forcing, but will implying basically patients or even citizens to use clinical applications for collecting who they have been in touch with, or localization, GPS tracing, and so on. Everything, all this is generating data, big data, and in order to be using that data, making a business intelligence from it, you'll have to use it efficiently and make the relationships with other databases and other outcomes. And that's why AI and data analytics is becoming more and more information. But I have a question for you, Nagesh. So with that, we're coming more or less at the end of the session here. But before we close up, I just wanted to ask you if, because we said a lot of things, a lot of different areas, from clinical to even other therapeutic areas. We talked about technology, CROs, hospitals. But if you needed to create 4 takeaways for the audience here in terms of how to approach AI, digital data, in terms of their future initiatives and company initiatives, what would those be, please?
Sure, thank you. So I would recommend to have a data culture, leadership mindset. Everyone should have the data mindset, where you treat data as the most valuable asset. The organization should go for digital approach, digital mindset. Again, try to go paperless with increased automation across functions, because that will give you data which can be used to analyze, do analytics, take informed decision. When you are using paper in some or the other function, you will not have enterprise-wide view, 360 view, take decisions. And then should the sponsors and the pharma companies should treat patient first approach, where you should focus on the outcomes, patient care and wellness, and increase the collaboration. I would rather recommend with payers, collaborate, search for payers, to partner providers to do your studies efficiently, look for physicians and partners is your vendors and CROs, CMOs, technology vendors, and so forth.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from this slide here is patient first. It's all about patient centricity. That's the end customer, if we can call it this way. That's the end interest party, basically, of the whole endeavor, is to make patients, is to make citizens better, to expand their lives, to expand the quality of life. And it's all about the patients. And all the technology, all the tools, all the other players around it are to facilitate the position of that patient in the whole ecosystem of health, basically. And that's why it goes beyond just pharma. It's about the health system, basically, on a global basis. And again, due to the recent unfortunate COVID-19 situation, we have been seeing flaws in a lot of cases, actually, in a lot of countries who are suffering with not having enough beds, not having enough, a mouth mask, for example, respiratory machines. I'm not saying we will solve everything through better AI or better data collection, but at least we will be able to predict what is coming our way if something like this would happen. And that will be based on data, tangible data, and tangible AI.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we're a little bit ahead of time, but we wanted to make a clear message here with a clear outcome. Amy, from our side, I would like to thank the audience here and be open for more questions now, please.
Sure. Thank you, everyone.
Perfect. I have.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I actually have two questions that came in about COVID-19. So the first one, how does COVID-19 affect data collection and analysis?
Sure. So if you are targeting some other therapeutic areas than COVID-19, organizations should go for telehealth uh, virtual trials, that is decentralized trial, what FDA calls as. There are companies and solution providers which have virtual trial solutions, and patient can give the data anytime, anywhere, and there should be it should complement with telehealth. That is the approach I would recommend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see this also. I can actually talk from a use case actually in our business at Stefanini Digital Health. We are working with some of our sponsors for large, very large, we're talking about thousands. One of them is 4,000, the other one is 6,000 patients in Africa. So on territories where the outbreak has not been so rude, so harsh, first of all, to find out what the reasons are, but secondly also because of the health system being much more weak in these areas, basically, be certain actually we grasp the medical clinical side of the whole endeavor, and we adapt to the future to see how, if there would be a large outbreak in these regions, how we could react to that. And since Africa, of course, is a great continent, a greatly spread continent, people are not necessarily all living in cities. Communication is not so good. The Wi-Fi connections are not really very good, so we have to work with initiatives like cards, 3G cards, 4G, 5G cards, basically on phones and so on for data collection. So these will be the challenges actually for the future as well. But for COVID, it's all about patient automation, patient at home, remote collection, do everything we can to avoid that patient who is being diagnosed or is suspected to be diagnosed with COVID-19, for example, to give you this example for a highly infectious disease, is to do everything we can to shift that basically to the home of the patient, and to avoid that patient to be mobile and only have to be mobile actually to go for a doctor's visit or to go to the hospital for getting hooked up to machines which are not available remotely. But everything else, going from an AI or like a chatbot type of video doctor's visits to, for example, in some of the other cases, stool collection, remote exams, basically where people are using different technologies to basically get a sample of, for COVID-19 sample of DNA out of the throat or the nose, basically through an online repository. So all that is having an impact actually on how we are seeing digital innovation towards the pharmaceutical healthcare system, with COVID-19 actually being a catalyst or an accelerator for these type of initiatives. So that's hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. And to add to that, we are talking to some of our large clients to how we can help them in this solving this challenge of virtual trials where patient can't visit the sites.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I hope that was a good answer for the first question. If not, we can move to the second one, please.
So you kind of answered both of them together. So I'll just move on. When multiple trials are going on for testing, how will that get administered on patients, and how to handle if any reactions happen?
Mm-hmm. So again, even if they are remote trials, if there is adverse event or something like that, it will again further go. You can visit the nearest. If it is very serious, you can call. You can visit the nearest facility. That is what I would recommend. If it is not so serious, you can reach out through your telehealth teledoc. That is what I would recommend. Did I answer the question?
In your opinion, do you believe that physicians appreciate interactions with chatbots in general?
Mhm. So at the initial screening, because there are a lot of loads of patients, because now if you see healthcare system is completely occupied to treat COVID, there is limited availability of physicians, nurses, doctors. Okay, so for initial screening, the validated working chatbots we would recommend, because that these will triage and direct to the appropriate caregiver. Did I answer the question? Emmy?
Great. Yes, I have one more. What benefits of pharma does data analyst provide?
Could you please repeat again?
What benefits for pharma does data analysis provide?
Oh, sure. So data analytics, again, for each and every function, you could take informed decisions. The leadership could take informed decisions for any of the function, be it, let's say, for example, clinical, if they understand the studies at the trials in this particular geography, the patients are not continuing the trial, they could then discontinue doing studies in those particular sites. So these are kind of informed decisions, let's say for supply chain and manufacturing with good data and analytics. The supply chain could be channelized based on the consumption of medicines. So the optimization in each and every function can be done with data analytics in pharma.
Yeah, it's all about execution of speed, actually, of action. So if a competitor, a pharma company, is also on the same molecule, and if they're using data more efficiently to bring results to the outcome of a clinical trial, obviously they will have the opportunity to launch a product through after validation of FDA to the market in a faster way, and get a patent maybe for the next 20 years. So that would be a huge competitive advantage to be first to the market, and also reduce that cycle of clinical trials or R&D, which is costing around $2 billion. If you can reduce that cycle, instead of making it, for example, for a molecule 7 years, have it efficiently done in 5 years, that's actually 2 years where you don't have to pay. You don't have to sponsor the clinical site or the patient and all the technology, the licenses, the support. So yeah, for pharma companies, efficient data analytics actually leads into hard dollars and speed of action in terms of execution of clinical trials, which is very important.
Yeah, and it adds to the top line revenue, which you could gain from the 2 years you could add against your competition.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone that dropped a question in the question box. Like I mentioned before, we are recording this session with the Q&A. So we will send that to you later today with some main takeaways. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Be safe and be happy, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, stay healthy, stay happy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.